very much. Well, yeah, I have a huge passion for technology. I have even more passion for helping businesses solve business problems with real world solutions. Earlier today, in fact, I was meeting with about five to, I think six, yeah, it's called six companies, discovering how AI is actually going to help them in their businesses and things like that, all while keeping a secure mindset and making sure that they're not going to open up their businesses to bad guys and all the new scary things that come with that and artificial intelligence.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Andrew, for sharing the AI part, but we're gonna jump to the technical part later. But at first, I would like to ask you some questions about your personal journey in Canada till now, and also your entrepreneurship. So, my first question would like to know is, started outside of the technology, like what inspired you leap into the IT world and the entrepreneurship?
Sure. Um, Quite frankly, I was enjoying the construction space. I tried many different careers and started different companies, and at that point, I was in construction, and I could see I kind of needed to make a decision of growing my construction company to support my goals or uh, get into some other line of work. And looking around, I could see the guys in the construction space were getting tired. Their bodies weren't holding up anymore. And I could see fast forward to myself, being 40, 50 years old, and it's going to be some tough work. So I had an opportunity with ActiveCo at that point to try this white collar job as opposed to the construction space. And so that was developed because at the time, ActiveCo had hired me a few times to do renovations for their clients' offices to build server rooms. And so yeah, they bugged me for probably almost 2 years to come work for them as a service manager, and I was quite happy doing my construction business and turned them down for quite a while. But if you've lived in BC long enough, you know it rains, and if you know construction, you're working in the rain, and I really don't like the rain. So eventually it was like I'm gonna try this technology space. I love technology. I built well, I should say I commissioned my computers, which is actually kind of funny as I think through. Even back then, uh, I love technology. I didn't really fully get into it with my hands, but I loved working with people in technology, and that was the role I came into, was not to fix computers myself, but to manage and work with teams of people that worked with technology. So that's where it started, and off we went.
Yeah, that's a very interesting journey because like from construction to technology, that's actually a huge gap. And I actually personally, I am trying to get into the industry of building as well. So that is also about construction. So like we can have the talk later. Yeah, so except that like during your journey, I want to know what was one of the most like important moments in your journey from a student to right now as a president of an international tech company?
Hmm. The most important one was probably the pivotal moment was super important, but it was so small I didn't notice it. If I think about it, it was a moment that happened that I was just kind of fulfilling my services and duties, and at that point, it is where my career shaped. And to give some more context, um, ActiveCo had a client that was going through a lot of problems with their networks. And at this point, I'd worked with ActiveCo quite a few times as a carpenter, as a construction worker, and did renos. And so I was good friends now with the owner. And he said, "Hey, Andrew, I got to hire you. You know, but this is gonna be a weird contract because I need you to show up in nice clothes and don't bring your hammer." So I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, like they needed some extra bodies at that point to help with this massive project." Um, and so I had no other, at that point I was between houses as far as building, and I didn't have a ton of work on the go. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go do this thing. It's gonna pay me for the next, couple weeks, and I'll figure it out as I go along. So I didn't think much of it, but that's when I guess I had really proved to ActiveCo, because again, he was kept trying to get me to work for them. Um, so this proved to him that he really wanted me to join the team. And at that point, that was where I saw a possibility to break into a new industry. So that was probably the most pivotal moment of going from that sort of student into ActiveCo, and then from there. I'm a firm believer in the four referable habits. Do what you say you're going to do, show up on time, finish what you start, and then, just say please and thank you. Have good manners, and so I lived that to the extreme, and so through my career at ActiveCo, it was just making sure no matter what I did for my clients or for the company, I was just doing those kind of four things consistently. And so I went from being hired here as the service manager in 2013 to 9 years later actually taking over the company, and yeah, now we're here. So that was that. I took over in 2022, and now we're here in 2025.
That's amazing. And just and I just want to ask, I mean, you did many networking that leads you to this new opportunity. Like, how did you know the person who invited you to the ActiveCo? Like, I mean, because right now as newcomers, we were told that we need to do networking a lot so that you can get more opportunities. And I just want to know how, I mean, how did you know him, and then what kinds of networking you have done before?
Yeah, great question. Networking is super critical. It is like, well, it's how you get anything. It's not just about work. It's how you find friends. It's how you find partners. It's how you find anything you want. Heck, it's even a form of networking to go on Marketplace if you need to find a new bike or something. So networking is very critical to do. So for me, I actually was networking with people in various communities and organizations that I was with. So whether it was in clubs or sports groups or activities, whether it was like church, it was getting to know people and getting to understand them and building those relationships that led me here. So I had met Sam, my predecessor at church. And that was where, again, I was networking for construction, right? And I was looking for construction jobs. And I got them. I started building construction jobs for ActiveCo because of that networking. And then off it goes into more things.
That's
You know what? I read a book recently. It's called The Go-Giver, and it takes a different approach on networking. So if you guys haven't read that book, I found it super inspirational of taking an alternative way to networking. So that's
oh.
just one for the class.
For sure. We can share the book in our community later. That would be awesome. Yeah, and thank you for your sharing of your personal journey before. So right now we are coming to the most important part, the business and your tech insights. Uh, so I want to know, like, during your professional journey, what are some of the biggest misconceptions small business owner have about cybersecurity?
Yeah. I think the first thing is the denial that it's not going to happen to them. Um, I think that's one that's a misconception. I think the other thing is that they don't think their data is valuable. Um, I was talking to a small business not long ago. They're about 8 people, and they do steel drawings for I-beams. They don't even make the steel themselves. They just draw I-beams for buildings. And so the owners, we were talking about cybersecurity and things like that, and he's like, we're 8 people. We can't afford cybersecurity. We don't need it either. I draw steel I-beams. I'm not a bank. And so I don't really care, because fine, have all my drawings. It's an 8 foot piece of metal. It's a 12 foot piece of metal. Like, it's not like it's national secrets. And so that was kind of the feel of the meeting. And so we, I guess, politely agreed to disagree. And then, we moved on. And then I ended up talking to him later on. He called back, and they had a breach And what had happened was the bad guys easily accessed their network, and they were sitting in there for 2 to 3 months watching how they invoice. And then the bad guys eventually created a rule that every invoice that left the company, the bad guys appended new banking information to the customers to say, hey, thanks so much for this latest job. Here's your invoice. Please make sure you update your payment methods and pay us at our new bank account here. And so you're right. The bad guys don't want drawings of your steel I-beams. What they want is they want to figure out how they can manipulate and extort your data and extort your information to get your money, whether it's locking your data or ransoming it, or in this case, literally just sending new invoice information. And so for about a month and a half to 2 months, all the money that they were expecting to get was actually paid to the bad guys. And so then they're like, wait, we haven't received money in a while. So they started calling their customers. So now it's been 2 months and 3 months, and they're like, where's our money? And customers are like, we're paying. And yeah, they were paying the bad guys the whole time. So when I think about small businesses and their misconceptions, it's you're not, no one is too small for the bad guys. I did it several years ago. I did a cybersecurity talk, and at that point in 2015, the bad guys were making an estimated $323 million a year off of ransomware and sort of nefarious acts. And it was about 2018-ish when I was doing that presentation. So in that short span of 3-4 years, it went from the 300 million to a couple $billion. Well, fast forward, I was doing a talk not long ago on the same part, and I went and updated that slide and looked at what it is now, and they're estimated anywhere between 10 to 70 trillion dollars estimated this year. They're making money, because that's their job, that's what they got to do, but they're making money because they're targeting not just small businesses as well. They're going the next step. They're targeting us as just individuals. Grandma will pay $1,000 to get her grandkids' pictures back, right? Like small businesses will pay, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to get their files back or to try to restore their networks. And so it's evident that they're going after those smaller companies, and why not? They don't spend money on their cybersecurity, so it's like shooting fish in a barrel, essentially. Like you don't have to try to beat the defenses of a big bank or a university. So that would be my biggest misconception, and what I try to help every small business understand is that you got to do some things, and it doesn't have to be expensive. I don't know if I'm anticipating a next question of what are some things a small business should do, because that's the first thing everyone always asks me right after.
Yeah, definitely. Like if someone going to or like having their small business, and if they didn't realize this, I mean this is the importance of having this workshop actually. So yeah, for sure. Like you would like to share any advice that you would like to give any small business owner?
Yeah. First one is MFA, multi-factor authentication. I tell my clients it's like Frank's Red Hot Sauce. I don't know if I'm dating myself on that commercial or not, but the Frank's Red Hot Sauce, there's an old lady and she says she puts that stuff on everything. Same thing with MFA. You need to put that on everything. All your accounts, your bank, your email, anything that you have. That's one of the number one ways to make sure you stop bad guys from getting in. Second one, and most of your accounts have free MFA, so it's not like it even costs you money. Now there is MFA tools you can buy, and it makes it easier because you have one MFA that applies to everywhere. You don't have to try all these different ones. Like a long time ago, I had almost 9, I think, MFA software apps on my phone just for all the different accounts I had. So, you can buy one and then have it cover everything, and technology's come a long way since then. But MFA on everything. Password management would be the next part. Another little quick story on that one is that your passwords are like your toothbrush. First, you should never share them with anybody. 2, you should make sure you change it every 6 months. You want to make sure you're constantly updating your passwords, changing your passwords, not sharing them. But I think the most critical thing on that is you do not reuse your password across multiple accounts. people, I think, have this misconception that if they just keep the same password or just, cat one, and then when I update it, cat two, like the bad guys have already thought about that. And what we typically don't know is that bad guys can try 6,000 passwords in a blink of an eye, right? So you think you're gonna just change it by one number, one character. Guess what? They tried all of those characters at once to try to get in, and so those are some of the things that you don't want to do. And that's why also, if you reuse your password for your Netflix account and your bank and your LinkedIn, and like if you use the same one the whole time, yes, it's easy to remember, but the minute any one of those might have a breach, right? We've heard about different companies having breaches and passwords are leaked out. LinkedIn, for example, back in 2016, actually, right? It had its breach. So if you have that same password on everything, again, the bad guys try it instantly to every type of account, and they'll get in. So you want to make sure, and yes, they're going to try LinkedIn 1 for this one and like LinkedIn 2 for that one, and they'll try all the variations. So password managers are not very expensive. So to manage your passwords, I'd highly, highly recommend getting a password manager. I have one even personally. It's like $4 a month, and that allows you to make sure you have unique passwords on everything. Some of them even come with services that if one of your passwords is found online, it will actually email you and say a breach has been notified and your password was there, and you can change it. So those would be the first two that are definitely free and definitely things that are the most impactful. After that, there's many other things small businesses should consider investing in. And then as you get larger, more sophistication would want to be put in place to protect what you're doing.
That's awesome. And actually I am kind of the bad case you mentioned. I actually use the same password for multiple platform, and okay, I'm definitely going to change it today. Yeah, and
Can I add one more thing on that one?
yeah, for sure.
As far as a password manager goes, Apple's Keychain is a good encrypted, safe password manager. So when you type a password and Apple remembers it for you, like I vouch for that one and say that's sort of the minimum standard. But storing your passwords in something like Google Chrome or Safari or those browser-based passwords managers, those are definitely not as secure as something like LastPass or Keeper or Dashlane, a proper password manager. My guys are not nefarious guys. My guys and girls, I should say, are not nefarious peoples. I think we timed it within 11 seconds. We can get all your passwords if you stored them in your Chrome browser password manager. So if someone gets access to your computer, even if you have different passwords, they'd have access to all of your passwords. So yeah, there is good and bad password management out there.
Yeah, that sounds scary. Yeah, but I mean, it's a good lesson for us to be aware of the importance of the password, since we're using almost everything like in the digital world. Yeah, so thank you for your advice before. And right now, I would like to ask you, can you walk through us a time when your company helped a client recover from like a major cyber threat? And is there any like bad case as well, like when someone is not taking the cybersecurity thing as serious as they should, and what things happen after?
Yes. Well, the good news is that we don't have a lot of clients that have issues like this, although we recently did have one. It was about a month ago, and it was a client that we are supposed to be protecting. And you know what? I'd say we are protecting to the best of our ability, but our hands get tied because companies have business decisions they need to make, right? They can't necessarily spend money on everything. And so this client was not actually that small of a client, but they had some very expensive computer software that they were using, and it was outdated. And they had a choice to buy new computer software for lots of money, or continue using the other one, but not have security patches being done on their software anymore. And so we said you should obviously upgrade. the budget did not allow for it, and so the customer decided not to upgrade and stay working on this security stuff. And I hear small companies making this decision all the time because money's a real thing, but there's a huge risk when it comes to it, because when you hear that software is not being patched, that means that bad guys know how to get into the software and do harm. And so at that point, your only protection is that you're one of, maybe 7 whatever billion people floating around on this rock, and hopefully they're not going to guess you. That's and that to me is not a good enough level of protection. So this customer had unsecure, unpatched software, and if we put our security tools on there, it wouldn't make the software run properly. So they told us to remove our security tools from the servers, and they ended up getting ransomware. The other thing is that most companies are starting to get the grips of, it's not will I get breached, it's when will I get breached. And that's scary enough. That's kind of like a thought that we have to also have in our brain, is like, it's not like I don't think I will, it's like, when will I? So having a proper business continuity plan, as well as having a proper incident response plan written down while your head's calm and everything, like that's what you want to do and focus on in the peaceful time. Because then when stuff hits the fan, you can go to that plan and you can actually start to think through logically what you're going to do. And you have, phone numbers you can call, how you're going to resume services. But again, they didn't have any of these things. So they relied on us. And fortunately, we have some sort of cookie cutter ones that we provide for our clients to follow. And so we brought them through their incident response plan. But one of the biggest failures in there is their business continuity. They did not have a good backup plan. Again, we consulted and said, you should invest in backups this way. They said, no, we're going to do it this way. And we had a very large I told you so moment. And so this company that had been, I think they're almost been in business now 35, 40 years. They essentially lost 100% of their data. And it's sitting across from business owners, knowing they made the wrong decision, knowing that this, not only is it the wrong decision and that they've lost all this data and all this stuff, the reputational damage to their business. Our invoice alone was 6 figures to them, and they had other vendors that they also had to pay to get restored back. And that's only to get functional. It wasn't like they got any of their stuff back. But the good news is, I guess, we were able to help them. We've got a very responsive, highly professional team. We work literally day and night, round the clock, and we had their core services rebuilt from scratch within 12 hours, and we had the entire company going within 3-4 days. So we'll see if they're going to be the statistic, because the statistic is roughly 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months of having an event or a breach. And so we'll see if they survive through this one or not.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
More scary stories, or should we go to fun stuff?
Yeah, and I actually was thinking that that was definitely a tough way to experience this cyber threat. But I was thinking because right now we have those rapid pace of technology changes, and also sometimes for small business we have to market ourselves and expose ourselves to the market, for example, our pictures and our names, and for our personal informations. And how do you think small business owner can balance the threat of this? Those AI threat, people can just make up a video that you say something else, but you have to still market yourself. How can people balance that?
Well, we can't freak out and not have an online presence, right? We have to still live in the world that we live in today. I think the biggest thing is that we do need to take measures to be safe. Everyone has a risk tolerance, whether it's investments, insurance, cybersecurity. We all have a tolerance of what we think is risky. In fact, even our hobbies, right? I'm a rock climber. Everyone thinks that's crazy. I think it's one of the safest sports you can do, right? There's a risk tolerance that we all have um, for various reasons. So putting processes and policies in place to protect yourself, and this everything I'm saying, anytime I talk cybersecurity, I hope people listen to my stories, but also think not just of their business, but of their personal life, because to protect both is very important, right? So here at ActiveCo, touch wood, we should never fall victim to those credit card and gift card scams, because our policy here is that I will never email anyone that has purchasing power to buy gift cards. It's the number one rule. The only way you can buy gift cards for Andrew, there's a bunch of them right here that were just bought today, is because I walk over to your office and you see my face and I say, I need you to buy gift cards. And that's a pain in the butt thing, because if I'm away on vacation or if I'm traveling for business or if I'm trying and I do need to get gift cards, I now can't do that. But it's worth the safety versus someone getting tricked, right? But I take it even into my personal life. If my wife gets a phone call from Andrew asking her to give me the credit card. I'm on the side of the road, the tow truck driver, my credit card's not working and the tow truck driver's needing to tow my car. I was just in an accident, blah, 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 blah. She's going to say, okay, cool, but what's the password? All of a sudden, the person will be like, what do you mean password, right? If it is me, I'll give her the password and she'll go, oh, okay, obviously this is Andrew calling. So there's, it sounds weird. It sounds like you're wearing a tinfoil hat. There's just different, again, risk tolerances, but there's ways that you can protect yourself by having those processes in place. And it's kind of like multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor means you typically have something you have on you and something you know. And so if you can extend those things to your business and to your people's and your personal life, and it's something you both know, it's something you both have, when you can have those in play, you can protect yourself.
Yeah, that's a very good advice. Thank you so much. And before we jump into the advice for our newcomers, is there any fun story you would like to share during your journey?
Fun story during my journey.
Yeah, any funny stories that you would like to share?
I don't think we have too many funny stories on it. It seems really depressing, but our line of business is kind of like the paramedics for other companies. No one phones us when it's good. No one calls up and says, hey, ActiveCo, how's it going? And we're having a great day. Like, we're getting the calls that our company's down, someone's trying to hack our thing. Like they're always calling us for that. I guess if anything though, it's the afterwards that's always enjoyable. We were able to get in there and help save companies. We were able to help them do things better, be more efficient. It's kind of like paramedics saving lives, right? Like, it's a horrible usual start to the conversation, but great endings. And that's why we wake up every day, is to be that sort of digital paramedic, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was asking because in the last question you say, should we jump to something fun? I said, okay, maybe you have some fun story you would like to share.
Sure, let's take a fun one. We had a client that takes our advice. They have a business continuity plan. They have the proper cybersecurity. They did everything right, and they still got breached. Because so the number one thing that causes people to get breached, and let's sort of set the record on this one. Bad guys aren't sitting down in a dark room, hacking away and typing really fast and trying to get into your stuff. All they're doing is they're sending out mass emails, tricking you to give them your money. Back in the 14 and 1600s, they had guns, they rode horses, they jumped on the train, and they robbed you. Now, they just trick you into you opening up your wallet and literally handing the money over to them. And then, that's what's happening. We get tricked. So people, you or your employees, you are actually the number one protection or risk in your business. It's not actually the bad guy getting to your computer. It's the bad guy getting to you. And so, you know, and as scary as it is, we have to be right 100% of the time. We have to do 1,000 things to always to protect ourselves. The bad guys only have to be right 1% or do one thing right, and they get us. So they have a much easier task. So if you have the mindset of it's going to happen, I need to be prepared, you'll be like some of the other companies that we've worked with that had that. And so unlike the one that lost everything, had six-figure invoices to get their company rebuilt and restored, and are at risk of potentially not existing in the next 5 to 6 months. The other side of the story is the ones that were doing it right and following the advices and the instructions. They had an issue. We had them operational under 20 minutes. They were restored. They didn't have to worry about paying ransom. Their whole business, all data, all files were protected. Everything was restored. And they were high-fiving us going, I'm so glad we had all this in place. So there's maybe some of the extremes. It's still a bad, horrible, scary story at the minute, but because they were doing things right, they were very thankful for that.
Yeah, that's definitely a good story. I mean, it's interesting to know that. And right now, because like most members in our community right now, they are newcomers in Canada. So do you have any, I mean, like what advice would you like to give to newcomers trying to break into business or tech world in Canada or specifically BC right now?
Great question. That's a challenge I've never had to face. I was born here, so I had never had to figure out how to break into a new market in a new market in a new country. Like that's probably one of my biggest fears. I've traveled abroad. Um, to think of going into a new country, new language, new culture, and then starting a business like that. My hat's off to every single one of you that have done that or are currently doing that. Um, that's probably why I'm still in Canada because I haven't had the guts to go do that. There's many beautiful countries out there I'd love to live in. But I think if I boil it down to just it's maybe if it's oversimplified, doing something new, you're coming to a new place, doing something new, you're starting a new business. The best thing you can do is as much research and as much learning as possible. Talking, asking questions, obviously getting involved with organizations like this as well. But I'm a firm believer in reading. A great leader, so business leaders, a great leader is a great reader. I can't remember who said that one, but it stuck with me. So I think that there's a lot of advice, a lot of smart people out there that have helped you others break into the markets. So I'd look into that. But I think again, from some of the books I had read, whether you're new to Canada or not, when you're starting a business, you're solving someone's problems. And so I honestly, if you have a true solution to someone's problem, if you're providing a true value to either a customer or like B2C or B2B, but business to consumer, business to business, I think people look past where you come from. Like we're a crazy diverse company here. Like over 12, like almost everybody is a different first language in this company. Like it's super awesome. And no one looks at where you come from other than potluck day when it's like the best food you could ever imagine because it's all different. So I think that's because everybody here is providing immense value. And so as long as you're looking at your value proposition, as long as you're able to clearly communicate that value proposition, you're going to be able to go a long way.
Yeah, that's so good, and I'm totally agree with the point that you say you do a lot of research and the networking you say before, and
If I may, sorry to interrupt you, I'm going to add a couple books onto that one because they say it way better than I do. So the Go Giver book will help you maybe culturally understand how people like to operate in North America. So that one may or may not be different than where your members are coming from. It might be the same, but it still is a great read. It reads like a story. It's really thin. It's super nice book. So I'd say that one was one. Um, One book I read a long time ago was called Building a Story Brand. I'm sorry, I can't remember all the authors' names, but these were instrumental to me in my career. Building a story brand helps you put together the way that you can effectively communicate the value you bring. So that one would definitely be another one to help as you're starting out. And again, it doesn't matter which country you're coming from. If you're starting a business, these would be the books I would read if I'm starting a business, period. And I'd probably, if I went to move to Japan, I'd probably have to learn the culture, but then I'd use these books to tie into the Japanese culture, for example, of how I could, bring these to reality.
Yeah, that's really good. And we will definitely add this books to our recap post of this storytelling event. And like we will encourage people to read to read those books. And adding to your point before, so right now many newcomers or just like business owners when they first want to build their own business, they usually struggling with the imposter syndrome, so which is feeling uncomfortable when you're experienced and you're thinking you're unqualified and you're thinking some achievement you have got is kind of like luck. So do you ever face this self-doubt in your earlier journey? So how did you overcome it? And what kinds of advice you can give to people who is experienced this?
Well, I think the advice I would give is welcome to the club. Um, I think I read somewhere once like 70 to 80% of professionals, experience this. And I don't think they suffer from it per se. I'm not a doctor, but I think though that when I was looking into this, a while back, a lot of people experience this, meaning it happens periodically. It's something I don't think that ever goes away. Like it's head trash. It's just stuff that flows into your brain, and like trash, you got to take it out. You can't let it sit there. You got to make sure you talk to somebody, someone that you trust. You got to listen to what you do and what people say, and take it at face value. When people say great job, don't let the head trash be like, oh, well, they didn't think it was. Like, why would they come tell you great job if it wasn't a great job? Like, right? Like you got to like sort of let those things go. Someone a long time ago told me that, and I think one of the things that contributed to my own, if I even had it, it was never diagnosed with me, but I'll say I had it, was when you being humble. Being humble is not thinking less of yourself; it's thinking of yourself less. And so what happens is if you are thinking like less of yourself, you're putting yourself down. That's where you're going to get that like cycle of imposter syndrome to keep pushing yourself down. So it's okay for you to think that you did a good job. That's thinking that you did a great job is not being an arrogant person per se. You can be humble and still have these strengths. True humility, though, is thinking of yourself less and thinking more about what can I do for the other person, right? Knowing you bring value. So hopefully that helps, but I'm sure there's a lot smarter doctors and people out there than I can do for curing that syndrome.
Yeah,
So
but
with that
definitely
statement,
it's a very
ironic to
good
know more
advice you give
positive.
me. Yeah, thank you so much. And I am sure that our audience here have some more questions to ask you. So I will save my question today. So and I will pass it to the Q&A sessions and let people ask more questions. So thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing your personal journey and your professional insight with us today. And let's jump into Q&A session because I have see some question inside the chat box. So one question from Carlos. So he's saying, do we need to change our bank passwords every 6 months? And password manager is the same as the Apple's password app. Is that help? From Carlos.
All right. Um, it comes down to risk. If you change your password every day, you'll probably have the least chance of ever having a breach. You're also going to have the biggest headache of your life. So it's on your bank and different things like that. Yeah, you might want to change it more often. If you have MFA in place, if you have a very complex password, so my passwords are typically 24 characters. I don't even know any of my passwords because they're all crazy jumbled things, and I use my password manager to do that for me. So if you're
Yeah.
doing that, no, you can probably change them a little bit less. But it just comes down to your risks. And if people ask me my professional opinion, you're always going to get, yeah, every 6 months you should change your passwords.
Thank you, Andrew. I just wanted to ask something else. I know that you answered those prior questions before.
Sure.
So let's say I'm starting an online business. Okay,
Yes.
selling things online, etc. What things should I be aware of regarding cybersecurity when doing an online business?
Yeah, when you're doing an online business, you're going to want to, are you going to be taking payments and things like that online?
Yeah.
Are you going to be having, well, if you're taking payments, you're going to have a bit of a marketplace, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you going to have client portals where they're logging in to manipulate or work with data that is touching data?
No, just let's imagine is buying and selling products through a marketplace or Shopify store.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So, using third parties, especially when you're starting out, using third party services like a Shopify or other services like that to manage the credit card payments and manage those other security services that come along with it is great because they're going to take a lot of that on.
Okay.
Make sure you read the contracts and whatnot to see what they're doing with the security services for you. If budget allows, have someone do a risk assessment, a security risk assessment of your network and or online presence. There's kind of two things. There's a security assessment, a risk assessment, and then there's penetration testing. So the difference between those two, an assessment is typically automated tools that have been invented, like our company would use, that we don't have to do a lot of human work on. So it's really cheap, it's cost effective to run those, and typically it finds all the low-hanging fruit. It's no sense in, if you haven't built a good defense, it's no sense in testing it yet because you want to sort of build your fort and build up your strength first before you throw something really expensive at it, right? So look at assessments first, and then once you really feel that things are good, if you still want to sleep well at night and you still want to make sure that you're protecting, maybe you've grown a bit at that point, then you could definitely think of the penetration testing. And that's where a good guy acts as a bad guy and does everything they can to try to get in. And then they end up showing you how they got in, what they did when they got in, what malicious acts could have they done. So yeah, that would be my recommendations.
Thank you, Andrew. And my last question is, right now we have AI, cybersecurity. What do you think are the challenges that companies will have in the future?
Oh. There's so many things that are possible. The reason they call them computer viruses is because, like actual viruses, we don't know what they are, right? COVID came, we never heard of it before, and we didn't have vaccines because we didn't know what vaccines we had to make yet. So same thing with when it comes to AI and cybersecurity. We don't know what's going to come. We know something will, though, right? We know that AI is enabling already bad guys the ability to do more than they could before, and it's enabling new junior bad guys that don't have to study for very long to actually go and become malicious a lot quicker. The good news is that all the big security companies out there are using AI as a defense to look for behaviors and analytics as well. So as fast as they're learning how to use AI to get at us, the good guys are using AI to protect. And so I do see us keeping pace that we haven't. It's not like AI came and the bad guys are now crazy smart and we haven't been able to keep up. Like, we're keeping up, but it's their job to find a new way around. Like I said earlier, right? They have to just find one way. We have to protect 1,000 ways.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here we have a question from Rebecca, and she say more of a personal question. I see a lot of apps where they are claiming to protect your laptop security by periodically scanning your data regularly for viruses and preventing attacks. How effective do you think these apps are, and if they are trustworthy, which ones would you recommend?
Those viruses, by the way.
Ah, okay. Okay. Oh, yeah, viruses.
Um, cybersecurity is a couple things. One, it's like fitness. You never actually get fit. Like you have to always keep working at it. So cybersecurity is very much a similar mindset. It's something you're going to continue to always work at. Second to cybersecurity is one tool does not solve everything. When we work with that, and that's why, as small companies start out, they can only maybe get one tool, but because it's a fitness and you constantly need to get stronger, you need to eventually consider layered approaches. And the whole thing is that because one tool doesn't stop everything, you have another tool that catches what the other one missed, and you build your layers strategically to try to make sure that that you can block as much as you can. Windows Defender is really good, and it comes built into Microsoft, and it's free. So if you're using a Microsoft computer, there you go. It's pretty good. You don't have to necessarily subscribe to most of those. In fact, my advice to friends and family, because that's, people that are doing small businesses like those, is avoid, Norton and McAfee and some of those others, because they end up putting a lot more bloatware and problems on the computer and they don't catch a lot of stuff. So Microsoft Defender does a pretty good job. There's a few other softwares that are out there that if you have some budget, like SentinelOne or WebRoot, those do really well. Malwarebytes is another one. So using those types of tools are great ways to get started as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the whole question. As far as viruses, how do we protect ourselves? Should we use I think you can also do like a lot of reviews of people, like if there's 2,000 people that have reviewed this and it's got 4 stars off of what's the website called? It's called it'll come to me. There's a website, because I've even submitted on it several times, as far as they actually do software comparisons. And so you can go on that website, and whether it's antivirus software or if you're looking at CRM or other software for your business, people have rated it and told you the good and the bad about it. So it'll come to me here. I'll try to Google it while we do the next question.
Yeah, for sure. And and me and Rebecca has the same question. Then how about for MacBook? Like you've mentioned some softwares for like Windows but what about MacBook?
Yeah. Macs used to be a lot more secure, and quite frankly, I always would say Macs were secure because parents bought their teenage kids cheaper computers, and then the teenage kids are bored and they just figure out how to hack stuff and do stuff, and so they would make viruses for PCs, and PCs are a lot more open to work with different areas, so it's easier to attack them. And so natively and naturally, Macs were more safe, but that's not the case as much these days because more and more people are using the Apple products and specifically Macs. As far as they go, most of those softwares I've listed off do install on Mac OS platforms as well. So that's why I like those.
Yeah.
And I think it's G2 crowd, G2.com. That's where I've contributed a lot of my, like when I use software and give ratings and stuff like that. Capterra is another one. So if you're in the market and looking for some of those tools, those are 2 different places that you can find those ratings.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. And I think I have one more question actually from one of my friend who's studying cybersecurity in New York Tech right now, because I graduated from New York Institute of Technology, but Vancouver campus. So unfortunately, he has class today, so he could not join the meeting. But he say he wants to know that is there any specific innovations or tools that that have been particularly effective for your team?
Yeah, Huntress is probably our favorite tool. I didn't list it here because it's a little pricey. I don't know how people can, but if you want to look up Huntress, it protects your M365 accounts. It protects your systems. So yeah, that one's been one of the most effective tools. CrowdStrike, you might have heard of them because they were the ones that last year, like all airports shut down and everything because of an update. They were running CrowdStrike. That was a mistake. And again, like most antivirus stuff, it was a person. They made a mistake and then boom, the whole world shuts down. But as far as the software works, CrowdStrike is a really good software. So, we use that here. We don't use it for many customers. Again, it's pretty pricey, but because he's studying cybersecurity, I think he'd appreciate to hear more of these ones. But SentinelOne as well, I mentioned that on the call here today. Most of the times if an event or breach happens, and you bring in insurance companies and they bring in like some cybersecurity experts from the insurance companies, it's usually SentinelOne and Huntress are usually the tools that are deployed out to do any kind of reconnaissance and recovery.